All right, let's go ahead and get started since you're all quiet already. Anyway, I wanted to end today with a Q&A section, and we have selected here a panel of experts that hopefully is a cross slice of everything. So different functions. I think we have PMs and engineers, different offices, time zones, organizations, everything. But in addition to the people that are up here, I do want to say if anybody out there has an answer to a question, don't hesitate to run up here and steal the mic from one of these guys. We have the Google moderator with questions from you guys and Blink Dev and from the internet at large. From what I understand, it got spread out a little bit. But feel free to ask live questions as well. Just raise your hand and I'll call on you. If I don't see you, make noise. Yes, perfect timing. While Dimitri is working his way up here, can the rest of the panel please introduce yourself? Who you are, where you work, what you work on, whatever.
All right. Hi, I'm Alex Komorowski. I'm a product manager on Chrome's web platform team. I work on Blink and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm here right now. I work in Mountain View, I guess.
Hey, I'm PDR, or Philip, and I work on Blink. I'm an engineer, and I know most of you guys. Philip.
So my name is Lars Erik Bolstad. I work for Opera, where I head up the Chromium Blink team. Used to be in charge of Presto development, based in Norway.
Hi, I'm Doug Stockwell. I work on mostly animations, and I'm from the Sydney office.
Hi, my name is Laszlo Gombos. I work for Samsung, part of the Samsung web platform team, mostly hacking on Blink.
Hi, I'm Alex. I am a Blink engineer from Google, and I mostly work on standards. So come bug me about what's wrong with standards.
I'm Philip Jagenstedt in Opera's Blink team. I do a lot of audio-video stuff. I edit the web BTT spec, and yeah, I like standards and removing stuff.
Hi, I'm Johan. I'm from the Munich V8 team, and I work on everything in the browser.
I'm Dimitri. I should not be here. I only submitted 6 patches in the last, or 4 patches in the last 6 months. So, but I'm an aspiring performance junkie. So there you go. I worked on web components at some point. One of those things.
All right, thanks. So let's get started with the first question from the Google moderator. We're trying hard to get 60 frames per second in Blink, but Safari does way better on iOS devices. What's the deal with that?
Test. All right. So one of these is we should be doing as well as they are. So when we're not, you should file bugs for sure. Number one answer. But the second one is that we are doing some things to make this happen. One is the slimming paintwork you saw today. The other is Ganesh, which is our GPU-based rasterizer. So these are 2 things we're doing to address the raster performance, which you might see in animations. Nico points out on iOS we use System Web View. I believe.
I think the question knows that. I think it's comparing Chrome for Android to Safari iOS.
Stephen?
And it's also the case that they have a very tightly controlled device space in which they can optimize and operate.
Can we do that?
So for the recording, what Stephen's pointing out is that iOS has a smaller profile of different types of devices to optimize for with certain known GPUs, whereas Android devices are more diverse, and so it's harder to generalize. Rick?
We're also missing the APIs that would enable browser benchmarks to compete in this space. So we've got agreement with Safari to add APIs so that we can actually compete.
Rick points out that there aren't good APIs for like the frame rate, for example, that's happening, and so it's hard to benchmark and compare browsers. And that there's been some discussions recently about adding those APIs that should allow browsers to compare and ideally compete on that kind of performance as well. Because as we know, I mean, it's not anymore that JavaScript performance is like the bottleneck for a lot of developers. It's animation performance and it's recalc style and that kind of stuff. Do you have anything else you want to add, Nat?
Oh yeah.
Will Blink catch up soon? Yes. But also we'll go further, and we want to go more web platformy. So Safari's strategy is focused on document viewing, not making an amazing, compelling platform. This is that whole 2 properties versus 300 to 400, depending on how you count. And I think we can show a new way and a more radical and more developer-friendly way than the way Apple is doing. So that may mean that our route is a little longer in the in sort of execution, but we will get to I think a much stronger point of competition and awesomeness.
And also, competition in this area is great. It's awesome that Safari has built such a great mobile browser, or Apple has rather, and that we want to do the best we can do as well.
All right. When we remove a feature from the platform, do we break a lot of things? So based on that, I guess, are we removing things too aggressively or not aggressively enough?
I would say that we don't break a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of removals, and all of them under the 0.03% cutoff point. And for most of them, I have seen 0 breakage that's come back to me. That is, and I mean, if one of them was reverted, but mostly it's been smooth sailing, and I think we could remove stuff with a higher usage than that. I would like to point out that, I mean, the counting the percentage is not great because every removal is a little bit different. Removing functions is much riskier than removing properties because that code would now start throwing instead of just setting the property where it wasn't there, for example. So it doesn't make sense to have a set boundary, and we don't really have that any longer. It's like if you can make the case and then intent to remove, then you can do it. And I think there have been a lot of removals, but they're mostly stuff that doesn't matter, and we still have this huge baggage of stuff that's above 1% with no plan to get it down, and no, we're not willing to take that risk. I think we could raise the bar a little bit.
So there's an obvious example from the recent past of show modal dialog, which we knew was a big feature that we were removing. We actually even talked about it on the Chromium blog, and that was challenging. I think it's still not enabled. We've disabled it, but that was an example of a feature where people did rely on it, especially older enterprise stuff, and there wasn't a great way to replace it, to drop and replace it. So it is. We do feel that pain every so often.
Yeah, I think it makes a big difference. A feature which is hard to remove is obviously a feature which is hard to replace for the web developer. That then maybe 0.03% is, well, maybe it's not too high at least. Yeah, that matters.
And before we kind of went on like this 0.03 number, and I'd like to be more pragmatic about it going forward instead of using hard numbers, exactly like Philip said. Actually comparing how the web usage actually looks, and I think we have some tricks up our sleeves to do this kind of thing. Things like using some of the internal data we have at Google from the index and things like that to help measure, do the best we can to make sure that we're not removing features people are actually using.
Although it is hard. All those tools have a blind spot, right? So there's going to be some stuff we can't find. And deprecation is this problem that every platform has, I think. Every platform increasingly adds more and more capabilities over time, and developers are using that for older stuff. And it's fundamentally hard to remove some of this stuff. So I think it's important to strike the right balance, personally.
All right, then we'll continue with the moderator. We want to be data-driven, but a lot of times we don't have the right data. What data would be useful? What should we be looking at?
I guess this hits on the same what I was just talking about, so that we have some statistics that we get from folks who opt in to sharing anonymous usage that really gives us a great anonymous idea of aggregate idea of what people are actually using, what kinds of functionality people are actually using in websites, but that has some blind spots for people who don't turn that on, for example. There are also lots of cases we've run into where we don't know who's using a certain feature, and we know it's probably only a handful of sites, but we don't know who they are, since we can't reach out to them to let them know, hey, we really encourage you to move off of this. And sometimes we'll stumble across and realize that CNN is using this API or something, and we can go reach out to them directly, but it's not often we can do that. We've talked a lot of different ideas to this. It's just kind of a hard problem, I think.
Yeah, this is an idea I've toyed a bit. I think I mentioned on BlinkDev at one point, something which would be very valuable for figuring out how to get usage down is to have an instrumented Chromium run on like a top 1,000,000 sites and just report which sites trigger which use counters. Because yeah, it could turn out that there's a single offender which we could reach out to. Although it would be hard, because if you just load the site and then count, you're gonna miss a lot of stuff. So maybe you should like emulate the mouse moving around a little bit, and maybe click on the biggest element or something to get some of just get a little bit more of the JavaScript running. There's still going to be lots of stuff you miss. Like say the full screen API, you can't get it to go into full screen and then notice those use counters, for example. So you can't get 100% coverage, but you can do better than just loading as well. So build that tool, please.
We welcome ideas on how to do this better. So, and also I think BlinkDev, the intent to remove, a number of times people have showed up there and said, "Oh my gosh, you please not remove this feature. I need this." And I know sometimes I think it feels like we're being harsh sometimes with that feedback, but it is really useful feedback to hear from people who are actually using it. You get a sense of if there's places we aren't aware of people using it.
Is there anything other than show modal dialog and the little WebKit point mishap that you're thinking of?
Yeah, there were the adder node things, right?
Oh, yes.
So there's a funny story. Recently we broke Outlook Web Access, which has a history because they also used show modal dialog by adding a new feature. So we tried to add array prototype values, which is an ES6 feature, and it turns out that they used values in a way as a key in the array that it collided with the new prototype. But actually, they were quite funny, right? So they said something like, "Oh yeah, please don't fix it and tell us what else breaks."
In that case in particular, I remember seeing the bug for that, and that's again to developers and folks out there, using a dev or beta is really important, and filing bugs when you see them. Don't assume that we're going to magically know about it. So
that bug was not triaged. It was filed in like a month before we noticed it.
Okay, that's a.
Someone was using dev or beta. That's good.
Good. Okay. So Adam points out that in that particular case there was a bug filed, and then we didn't notice it for a month. Great.
All right. What is the distribution of owners like, and are we doing anything to alleviate owners that have too many code reviews?
Yeah, this is a problem. So I looked at the stats before this. We added 16 owners in the past year, and we have a total of 60 core owners. This is core owners only. We have 60 core owners today. So that's what we've done so far to help alleviate this problem. But it's still definitely a problem, and we need more people to spin up as owners and take ownership of areas of the code. We recently introduced sub-owner files as an approach to kind of help this. And if more people can step up to really start owning code, that would be great.
I also want to encourage people to look beyond Blink when we work on Blink, on like device APIs or storage or service worker. Usually you have to work on Blink and content, and the owner situation in content is even more tense than in Blink from my experience. Part of this is the structure of splitting up the features in content, comment, and renderer. So basically, you always need some top-level owner to review stuff. Part of this is also that historically the owner situation was much tighter than it was in WebKit or Blink. But as soon as we merged, which hopefully is soon, it makes sense to think about how how can we ensure that we get enough reviews and enough throughput also in content. And like I expect that the WebKit API, the public directories, will become less critical. So one of the reasons we have a smaller group of owners in this directory is that it's just very painful to fix mistakes you made in the public API. But once we merged, it's kind of easy. It's a single commit that can fix it. Right.
All right, this might be another one for Nat. Why isn't there an explicit way yet to contain reflow or layout in a web app, especially when it has dramatic performance improvements?
I'll take a piece of this. There are a couple of angles here. One is that some elements do form some light. Hello? Can you hear me? Some elements do form light reflow boundaries, or we call it layout. There are elements that do this today. I don't know how well we expose them to web developers. The second angle to this is if you're appending things to the bottom of a page, we should not be doing full layouts already. This should be true already today. When we are, these things are likely bugs. Some additional?
So when I look at specific questions, this is a great question. What I like to do is I like to say, what are you afraid of? You, the collective architects of the web platform, what are we deathly afraid of? The data, when we had BlinkOn 1, we were pretty afraid of layout. We'd look in Inspector and it'd be like ginormous. And then we benchmarked it, and we looked at it in tracing, and Mr. Spren in the back looked at some data. Looking at you, man. And we discovered that it wasn't layout. It was what is now called slimming paint. It was recalc. It was other things, rasterization. Layout can be bad, but there are some things that are truly scary, like CSS, in terms of computational cost. We do have, for controlling this, the layout boundaries, and then we have CSS containment. But we think that probably one of the original sins here, as far as scaling, is element count. And we should possibly start a dialogue soon about controlling element count in the DOM so that the amount of work that we do in recalc and throughout the stack is proportional to what the user is seeing rather than what's in the document, which may mean virtualizing and all sorts of stuff. But like, think not so much about reflow, but the fundamental scaling factors. Help us find them. And then once we know what those fundamental scaling factors, start a debate about that.
All right, thanks. How can we improve Blink and Chromium for open source contributors? And I'll direct this on behalf of Anonymous at our non-Google contributors.
Yeah, so one feedback from Opera is that we, after working on this now for a year and a half or something, we think the Blink project and the Blink process that they work well with the intent processes. We would very much like to see something similar for Chromium, because we feel, even though we're sitting, different time zone and outside Google, that we have a fairly good overview of what's going on in Blink, but quite often we don't really know what's going on in Chromium. And so it is typical big changes there that hurt us, with things coming down that we didn't know about. So if that's at all possible to have a similar process for the wider Chromium project, that would be extremely helpful for us at least.
So one question: when you say Chromium, do you mean the content module, or do you mean components? Which parts of Chromium are you actually surprised about?
I don't know if I have a good example of things I'm surprised about, but what I refer to is everything outside Blink that we use in our product. So what we call Chromium.
Okay.
V8, all the different stuff.
I assume it's like everything that is compiled when you compile Blink tests.
That's a good definition.
So
Yeah, a little bit to add from Samsung's perspective. I think generally I can say that we're fairly happy. We contribute a lot. We involve. We feel we are involved. We feel we're being appreciated. We constantly getting feedback, both negative and positive, about how we're doing. We're trying to improve. We have about 30 committers, few owners. We landed about 3,000 commits last year or so. So I think these are great statistics. They're just still numbers, but I think it shows that the community is really healthy. In terms of what can be improved, I can agree to the Opera feedback. It's not just the content layer. It's things like V8, Kia, things around Android and the Chrome shell, and so on and so forth.
Intel, everyone. Can someone repeat that? At some point, Alexis points out that some APIs like geolocation was changed and in content. Mm. Right. And so it changed the delegates that Opera and Crosswalk would implement, and so it was just a change, and you had to deal with it, basically. Did I paraphrase you okay? I added a little sound effect.
So here's what I'm doing to keep track of this. I'm just watching commits touching content shell, because if you change something in the content API, you will have to update it in content shell as well. And it gives you a good overview of what is going on without having to read through thousands of CLs.
But wouldn't you agree it's fair to say that Chromium is a little bit more opaque than BlinkOn?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
It's not so much about just understanding what's going on and after the fact. It's also about being able to plan ahead, because we might have things downstream that needs to change because of that, and that's by definition going to happen after.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to echo Dasharik's praise for the intense process. I think that's working really well. With this kind of there's some way you can go to and get a clear answer, yes, no, and not be stuck in limbo. So I think that's great. I'm going to guess that the question here, I don't know, Anonymous, but I think it's probably referring to like smaller, maybe individuals contributing. And for them, it's almost certainly the case that build times are a big problem. So, and even for, anyone not using Goma, this is going to be a problem. So if there's anything we can do to improve build times, that would make it easier for yes, but there's a maintenance burden. It quite often breaks. So. Basically, from time to time, you have to patch ICC or Ccache, and then you also have to fiddle with your JIP defines to maybe disable some things. Like right now, you have to disable the Binutils gold that comes in the Chromium tree because that doesn't work for whatever reason. So stuff like this. So there's a maintenance cost for anyone, not Google, who try to get better build times. Yes, that is true.
Okay, while we were just talking about the intent system a second ago, how can we reduce the pressure on the intent system so that it's less of an approval process and more collaborative?
So I'm not an API owner, but I helped draft the original process back in the day, a year and a half ago or whatever that was. It's not that long ago. But when I was working on that with some other people, what I was trying to get across was this notion of, ideally, the intent to ship is it's a rubber stamp because we've already socialized it with the community, we've already talked about it. It's not this going in front of a firing squad kind of thing. And I think it's good for people to discuss these things in Blink Dev and float ideas and say, hey, how are people feeling about how the spec looks for service worker or whatever? It's my own personal opinion that kind of discussion on the public list would be good.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd like to note that that's not how it works in practice today. I think that the higher bit is that if you would like this process to be easier to navigate, it would be helpful for this room to decide today that it should be easier to navigate and that people should be able to ship more things with less friction. So my perspective is from the standard side and sort of watching the progress of the overall web platform, and I'd like to suggest in a very self-interested way that we're not moving nearly fast enough. We don't ship enough new stuff, and so this group is primarily both an agent of positive change, but also one of the largest bottlenecks. And so it would be helpful if we agreed that we should be shipping more new stuff.
Do you want to say something? One thing I think we can make this easier is, or at least we try to make it easier, is by having the BlinkOn that we try to build some kind of consensus what kind of features we want to ship. And Dimitri constantly tells me that the API owners are supposed to enable shipping stuff that brings us closer to our target and not necessarily be the gatekeepers of code health or whatever. So I would hope that we as a community have some kind of common goal that makes those intents to ship or intents to remove more rubber stamp than a test. And I think we could have even more intents to implement. So you don't necessarily need some. You could have an intent to implement for anything. It doesn't necessarily need to be something which you then later would have an intent to ship. It's just like a way to gather feedback or to announce that you intend to actually do some work on the code base and want to discuss it on the public mailing list. So the intent to ship or deprecate should more be like an invitation for discussion. And hopefully, since we have those regular BlinkOns where we build consensus and we had the discussions on the intent to implement before the intent to ships will become closer to what Alex described, that it's more like a rubber stamp and a good to go.
I agree. Actually, I agree with Alex. The one on the far that the original intent of the intent process was that the API owners is just bureaucrats and making sure that all the T's are dotted and I's are crossed. I'm sorry. And it turned into, by the de facto, the API owners also being the influential contributors to Blink, it turned into more of a evaluation of the feature. And so after I agreed with Alex, I'm going to agree with the other Alex and say, yes, we should ship more, and we should be more focused about what we're doing. So I'm now agreeing with Jochen. I'm agreeing with everybody. Is that as long as we have a goal, which we tried to set at the keynote this yesterday at the BlinkOn, it should be more obvious to everyone in the community why this particular feature is good or not, and we should have less consternation and worrying about things based on the goals that we set. And so you can clearly see, oh, somebody's proposing that we share
And these BlinkOns are a great place to have that feedback because it's much easier to have some of these discussions face-to-face or in the hallway than it is over email sometimes. Especially when you say something on BlinkDev and a lot of people are reading it.
I'm a little bit curious. Is this pressure in these threads, is this hearsay, or is how do you know there's a lot of pressure to write those emails? Which
I don't think there's any pressure, but people apparently are scared to write them.
Because we're trying to ship features, and it's a very high pressure thing to do right now. So again, with the person who's trying to push features hat on, these are doing this process smoothly requires both a learning process by which one of your features doesn't go through it smoothly, and then from that process you learn that you need to do a heroic amount of work in order to get up to the next one, in order to convince people that it will go smoothly this time, so that you can pregame it. That has nothing to do whether or not it would have gone smoothly otherwise, but to guarantee a good outcome, today it is required that you pregame almost all of the decisions that you'd like to see made with all of the important stakeholders before you send this email, and that you spend about a week drafting it. It is not trivial.
I guess there are probably very different experiences out there. Having shipped myself several different features, I've actually quite enjoyed the process, and it's worked out quite well for us. We did spend significant time making sure we were ready to ship, working with other vendors to make sure that they were happy with the things that we were shipping. But overall, I've been pretty happy with the process.
Were you the first to ship those features?
Yes, we were.
I can see a set of features which are not aligned with the goal. So the first BlinkOn was 60 FPS on mobile, and then there were some people, not Google, who wanted to do other things, so like TTML, like CSS regions, and those things didn't go down well. So I guess that's the class of, like you just said, if you look at a feature and it's not aligned with the goals, then maybe the API owners are going to be a little bit less enthusiastic. But there are going to be a lot of those features every year which are still make good sense to ship, I would argue, and yeah. Don't be afraid, I guess.
All right, I'll be brave.
All right, before I charge forward, I'll check again for any live questions. All right, that's pretty clear. Does Opera collect usage data separately, and is that included on ChromeStatus.com?
We don't.
As well. What are we doing to keep CR bug under control, the bug tracker? Thousands of old bugs should be looked at, and they're falling through the cracks.
Just on the previous question, you don't collect usage stats, so...
We don't collect the use counter data. I guess there might be other stuff. I don't know, like these UI interaction things you might. I don't know.
I interpret the question as use counter, or similar as done in Chrome, and the answer to that is no. We do collect other types of stats, as in features in the UI, for instance.
Right, that's what I was wondering as well. And is there anything in the... I guess, is there, if you do collect stats on feed in the UI, is there anything that could be used to help improve Blink, similar to what we do on ChromeStatus.com?
Maybe.
I think it would be of limited value to collect use counter data specifically, just because of the market share. I mean, I think our user demographics are skewed quite differently. So I mean, you would see differences, but say if we see that this feature isn't used by any of our users, that isn't going to matter if it's used in the Chrome use counter data. So yeah.
All right, I know Mike was trying to distract us from the bug tracker question, but what are we doing with all the bugs?
Good question. So as I mentioned earlier, the filing good bugs, especially from the beta channel, is a really good way, hopefully, for people to highlight things before they go out to all the stable channel users for Chrome and other browsers. But you're right. If you're just someone who's just filing a bug, sometimes it's hard to get triaged into the right place, having the right people looking at it.
So can someone just summarize how things actually work today? Because I'm surprised to find bugs reported and then eventually directed at me. That's great. Sometimes it works. How does that happen?
So my understanding is that there are some people out there who triage incoming untriaged bugs. One person I know of is Kent. He's a superhero. He triages a substantial number of bugs. So I really support him in doing that. I think I don't know if we have a process for putting people in these positions. I think he probably just volunteered and just started doing it. It would be helpful if more people could take that opportunity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just gonna ask, do people follow labels? If we adding the appropriate labels that help? Because okay.
So I would say the current process seems to be this like CC on every at all. Somehow I imagine it gets CC'd by somebody. Seems like perhaps we should have a better process so that I'm not the funnel. It seems like if your name has ever been on a commit ever related to something here, it gets.
So Elliot's proposing that our triaging process stop being route all rendering bugs to Elliot first for proper triaging.
I actually think this is working well.
Yeah, I personally think it's great. I don't know. But we do have some folks on the Chrome team in particular who are in charge of the release process, who are looking at bugs, especially if you file a bug label like the M38 or M39 or whatever. That helps make sure it gets seen by that process, from what I can tell. And then they'll get the right labels on it. That's more likely that someone will see it, and then they'll get followed through on. But it's not perfect.
Just for people reporting bugs, I guess another great way to get people to actually look at your bug is, if possible, include a minimal repro. I think we have people out there who will look at the repros, bisect them, figure out which change broke, and CC the appropriate developer.
If somebody files a bug that has access to adding labels or uses the right form, that usually is the best way to at least get somebody to look at it, because they get auto-CC'd because they watch the label. I know that there are some teams that scan the bug database regularly for like completely undriaged bugs that don't even have a correct label and try to apply some labels to it. But I agree that there's many bugs that are filed by users that just use the default form fall between the cracks. So, yeah. But if you find a bug or somebody says like, oh, this bug doesn't have traction, like the best first step you can do is look at it and just apply a label for the area that is affected by this bug. That's usually enough to get it at least in the queue.
Does everyone know about the action bisect needed label? Needs bisect. Needs bisect.
I don't know how to triage a bug. I suspect if somebody wrote it down, somebody on the internet might help us.
Okay, so Mike points out that there's a needs triage label that we can apply. I'm sorry, needs bisect. Eric then pointed out. What did you point out? Oh, that you don't. I don't use those.
Eric was pointing out that he imagines that if we were to write down the steps for triaging a bug, that there's various people on the internet who would help us do this.
That to me seems pretty unlikely, because it's pretty difficult actually. Bisect builds only gets you so far unless you know the code. You'll have one or two blink roles to look at, and then you could start with the manual git bisect, which is going to take forever unless you have a build cluster. And then you want to minimize the test case, and then also there aren't any particularly good tools. So yeah.
That someone magically on the internet will appear. I'm saying that I don't know how to bisect a bug, and if I don't know how to I don't know how to triage a bug, and if I don't know how to triage a bug, who does?
I think we have a wiki page, and I think people actually do appear. Nico does. So we have a few people who so maybe I just.
But triage just means bisect the revision history and minimize the test case. Does it mean anything else?
It means CC the right people. Yeah, CC is right.
We actually have a page
Yeah, so Levi points out that there is actually indeed a page on chromium.org that shows you how to triage a bug. But like part of it is directing to the right label and getting it to the right people. And sometimes a bisect will help you uncover who the right person likely is. But like sometimes, I mean, I personally will just use like, oh, Elliot knows about rendering, and like there are other areas where like Rick probably on input is probably a good person to point it to, and he can redirect it to the right person in that specific area.
Really quick, we have a question out here. Your point is that new people can't add labels. That's right. Yeah. This is a case. So I interacted with a guy who's trying to file a lot of bugs recently, and if you're an end user, you don't have access to our label system. You probably shouldn't actually, but it's really hard for you to get any visibility onto these bugs because they go into the fire hose. Minimize test cases help. We should probably do better on our triage in general.
Yeah. So what an end user can do, we have a number of different forms, like one for security bugs, one for like whatever. We already try to pre-triage a bit depending on the operating system of the browser you use to file the bug. Yeah. So, but I mean, like this is basically the most regular end user can do is using the right form, and like if you use a security form, then there will be some traction on it. At least it will get marked as non-security and.
I visited the WebRTC team in Stockholm, Google's WebRTC team that is, and they said that they were using the number of stars to prioritize their work. So they had one very highly starred bug, and that was what they were going to do the next week or something. Is that something because that's something that you can do without edit bugs access. So is the star rating anything that's used consistently for all of Blink and Chromium?
It's a good signal that it has traction, that people care about it. It's not like the absence of stars does not mean that it's not important necessarily, but yeah, and every so often in Polish, just sitting back there somewhere, someone will flag an issue for him, and magically 1,000 stars will appear on it, kind of thing. But it is a useful way of detecting some of the really important bugs sometimes.
So since there's some confusion, I thought maybe it's useful to give an overview how bugs are handled. So if like regular end users file a bug, it ends up being unconfirmed. And then we have a few people who like actually look at new bugs, and if they try to confirm them and set them to untriaged and apply labels. And then it depends on every team how they watch their labels. Like some teams use auto CC lists, some people just click on their label and scroll through the newest labels and whatnot. And we have a wiki page that explains how to become a bug triager and how to get bug editing permissions. So basically, you just like make a few good suggestions on bugs and say, hey, this looks like a dupe of this, and I would apply these labels, and then you ask someone on IRC to propose you as a edit bug person. And that's a great way to get started in the Chromium and Blink projects, I think. And after that, it's up to the teams. So that there aren't like any magic fairies that will do triage and whatnot. If you work on a feature, you kind of have to ideally know how your feature label gets triaged, because if you don't, then nobody's doing it.
So does all of chromium.org automatically have edit bugs access?
I think so.
But could we do that for like opera.com and samsung.com? Because we have, it's kind of tedious to request it for everyone. Every coworker who ever wanted to poke at a bug. That could help a little bit, I guess.
I thought we did that at some point, at least.
We can look into that. We should look into that. Like, send me an email. We'll look into that. I feel like we've done this for a number of people in the past, but I can't remember exactly. And obviously, for what? Oh, yeah, Google.com. That's a good point. We have a lot of. Yeah, Google.com is not. No. Let's not do that. Let's not do that.
All right, yeah, so I think it's 5 o'clock, so we're going to close it. But thank you to all of our answers and people from the crowd as well.